What's up, everybody? It's Josh coming at you from Nerd Ventures Tower. I want to talk about the MCU Phase 4, some of the hate and disappointment that I hear from a lot of different fans out there. I want to kind of break it all down. Like, what is the deal with Marvel's Phase 4? Why does it feel different? I think it kind of comes down to, should fans be worried about it? Should they be understanding about it? And what should Marvel do to try to get back to the magic of the first 3 phases of the MCU? And I kind of got the idea to do this video because of the sort of mixed reception that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness has been getting. And then after the She-Hulk trailer came out, there was just a ton of MCU hate out there. My tweets and replies and ads were filled with people saying M-SheU, talking about how Marvel fell off, etc., etc. And if I'm being honest, it like really triggered me because I was like, man, what are these people talking about? Look around at what Star Wars and Warner Brothers is doing. Like, Marvel is still killing. But the more I thought about it, and I thought about it quite a bit, there are actually a few things going on here. And I think that it's fair to say a lot of people, for probably varying reasons, are feeling weird about Marvel's Phase 4. So let's get into this, and let's start with these M-SheU complaints. You hear that all the time. A lot of people talking about how Marvel's putting out a ton of new female characters, and that is true. It is absolutely apparent that Marvel has some kind of an agenda, or they basically want to put a bunch more female heroes into the MCU. You've got a character like Wanda getting her own show, essentially, and then being a massive part of Doctor Strange's movie. You've got Sharon Carter being the power broker and the flag smasher young gal being the main villain in that one. In Loki, you've got characters like Sylvie, you've got characters like Ravonna, and a lot of the agents that are female. The Hawkeye show has Hawkeye, but it also has Kate Bishop, and Kate Bishop is now going to be Hawkeye. On top of that, you have Yelena in there. Shang-Chi's movie saw both his mother and his sister being very strong female characters. The Eternals is incredibly diverse, and a lot of the female characters in that film are written incredibly strongly. You've got Jane Foster becoming the mighty Thor, and until recent changes, you likely had Letitia Wright taking control of the Black Panther mantle and becoming the Queen of Wakanda. And on a very interesting note on that one, when I talked to E-Man's movie reviews about Disney and this whole recast T'Challa movement, he told me in the podcast interview that I did with him that he had heard from many different people that when the family of Chadwick Boseman approached Disney about possibly recasting, they literally said they're not interested in having a male king. They want a female king for Black Panther Wakanda Forever. And so here's the deal, man. I am not a person that gets easily triggered when things like this are going on in pop culture. I know that representation matters to a great many folks at varying levels and degrees. And for me, it's all about execution. And a lot of the characters that I just talked about, I think are done really well. And I think Marvel is doing a great job with their female characters for the most part. But I think the problem, or at the very least the perceived problem by many other fans out there, is not so much the good that they are doing with the female characters, it is some of the bad stuff they are doing with the male characters. And there does seem to be a lot of examples of female characters being shown to be very adept, being very good at what they do, being strong characters in many different ways, and the male characters kind of seeming weaker, more inept, and almost like a doofus. Like, if you do think about it, they did turn Thor into something of a doofus. He became fat, he was very goofy, unreliable, and Jane Foster Thor, even though we haven't seen it, probably will be depicted as a very powerful, well put together individual. She-Hulk looks like she's going to be incredibly powerful, be able to still do her job as the Hulk and have a ton of different fun. And Professor Hulk, despite being a character that I really enjoy, is undoubtedly less alpha than the pre-version of Hulk. And so you may even see a scenario in which She-Hulk is able to do more smashing and be even potentially stronger than Professor Hulk. And I talk about this all the time, but all new, all different Marvel was a time period at Marvel Comics when they were obviously making political correctness and diversity and representation a big part of what they were trying to do. They made Captain America a black man. They made Thor into a woman. And even someone like me that doesn't get as triggered by these things as many of you out there do, I felt felt like All New, All Different Marvel was super cringy and not good. Because I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do this, and two of the big mistakes that they made during All New, All Different Marvel was, number one, elevating these other characters and also crapping on the original characters as a way to elevate the new characters. Like, massive mistake, man. Nobody really wants that kind of a legacy if you crap on the legacy. And so you didn't need to sort of put Tony Stark down a few pegs and get Ironheart to be the new Iron Man. You didn't need to make Captain America actually a Hydra agent and be super out of touch to elevate Sam. And you didn't need to make Thor unworthy and a doofus in order to elevate Jane Foster. And so I think that that was a mistake that they made in All New, All Different Marvel. And I also think that they took political correctness to an extreme length and became very pushy and heavy-handed with the politics. And the more I thought about this with regards to where the MCU is currently at, it is actually an issue. Some of this is just kind of happening on accident, I think, but I do think Marvel needs to take note. And one of the things that has really made this just seem more heavy-handed and really seem like Marvel's trying to push down strong male characters has been, unfortunately, the fact that Tony Stark is no longer around, the fact that Captain America is no longer around, and the fact that Chadwick Boseman has passed on. These were three incredibly strong alpha-like male characters that I think a lot of old school comic book fans and just male fans that want to see dope male characters absolutely love. And so without those characters and more examples like Hope Van Dyne being awesome, but Scott Lang being kind of turned into a doofus, strong lady Thor with Jane Foster, but Thor being unworthy and turning fat, strong She-Hulk compared to Professor Hulk, and on, it is seeming like the pendulum is unfortunately swinging a little bit too far when it's trying to correct and help out with regards to representation. And on a more hopeful note, I actually do think a lot of this stuff will be improved as we move forward. We have characters like Wolverine, Logan coming into the MCU. We've got Namor coming in. We've got Doctor Doom coming into the MCU. Two of the four characters in the Fantastic Four, Johnny and Ben Grimm, are also alpha male, atypical male characters. And so as far as that criticism goes, look, again, I think there's a lot of folks out there that just get way too triggered about this stuff. But the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, there is something there. And I've personally come away feeling like, yeah, Marvel does need more macho alpha male characters. Now, the other main criticism that's being thrown around Marvel these days is that it's directionless, and that especially if you compare the sort of end of the Infinity Saga, which led right up to Infinity War and Endgame, the current slate at Marvel's Phase 4 just doesn't seem to have an actual end goal in mind, and it doesn't seem to be put together with the same level of care and connective tissue that you had before. And this one to me is even more believable and obvious than the criticisms of all the female characters. I mean, clearly you don't have a same end goal, and you definitely don't have the same level of connective tissue. It seems like at the end of almost every MCU Phase 4 show, we are hearing all kinds of reports of really cool ideas, concepts, and other characters that were originally going to be in the show that were removed. Doctor Strange was supposed to be more involved in WandaVision. There were rumors that there was even going to be Steve Rogers scenes in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Hawkeye apparently had way more Kingpin at one point. And the rumors about Moon Knight are crazy. Like at one time, Gore the God Butcher was going to show up in that show. You were going to have a ton of other cameos, and all of that stuff seemed to have been stripped away. And with Kevin Feige recently talking about how he went to a retreat with all the higher-ups at Marvel Studios to figure out the next 10 years of storytelling, a lot of folks, including someone like Rob from Comics Explained, have been out online talking about how it really does feel like a lot of this current phase for Marvel has been filler. And there are a number of different things going on here. So number one, I kind of do think Phase 4 was always meant to be filler, at least the start of it. I mean, look, we just came off of Avengers Endgame, and that was crazy culmination of all these different things. And I think it's appropriate for the storytelling to sort of take a step back, to take a breath, and to spend some time introducing some of these new characters. So like Eternals and Shang-Chi, and even some of the stuff that's going on in these shows is all appropriate. But I think what would have been naturally just considered a fine break and a nice breath of fresh air now kind of feels bad because we went a whole year without any Marvel content whatsoever. And when we finally dipped our toes back into the Marvel pool, it felt like a breath of fresh air when we wanted to be bombarded with Marvel goodness. And so the plan that Marvel had, which was very likely to just kind of take a little bit of time to figure out their end game plan for this phase, actually now feels extra bad because we're thirsty for more craziness. And on top of that, I strongly feel that a lot of events that you could call like a Black Swan event or something that Marvel definitely didn't see coming have now altered their long-term plan. And I think one of the biggest ones was this beef with Sony over the Spider-Man character. In 2019, I was told that Marvel had way more projects that they were going to announce at San Diego Comic-Con that year, but about a week before Comic-Con, Sony announced they were taking the Spider-Man character back and they didn't need no Kevin Feige. And so I think in response to that, Feige cuts the slate in half, only talks about half of what he had planned, and he had to recalibrate his long-term plan as to not be so reliant on a character that he didn't have full control of. And I also think that Chadwick Boseman's passing, which nobody saw coming, was a massive blow to Feige's long-term plans. I mean, Chadwick Boseman was beloved as that character. T'Challa plays a massive role in Marvel Comics, and you're talking about $1 billion franchise that was a worldwide phenomenon. It's obvious that Feige had big plans involving Black Panther, Spider-Man, and a lot of the other MCU characters, and he very likely had to make massive changes to how he was going to get to Secret Wars, and I think those changes manifested in him removing a lot of the fun cameos and connective tissue from the projects in Phase 4. And on top of that, you of course got a ton of scheduling conflicts and production woes connected to the global health crisis that was going on that whole time. I mean, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was originally supposed to come out before Spider-Man No Way Home. They had to completely rework the plot of both of those movies to make it make sense. And all of that likely affected WandaVision. That's probably why a lot of that fun stuff was removed, because you don't want to commit to anything that you're going to have to change. But again, I have good news, Marvel fans, because I feel like we're almost out of the woods that were created by the weird, unforeseen circumstances, including the global health crisis. And the announcement of that 10-year plan is a big freaking deal. And I personally think that you're going to start to see a lot more of that fun connective tissue, awesome cameos, and just general sense of direction from the MCU for now on. And I don't think for a second Kevin Feige just suddenly forgot all of the great things that created the $23 billion grossing Infinity Saga. I don't think he has plans to completely change the way he does business in the Phase 4 part of the MCU. Again, I think there's definitely a focus on pushing these strong female characters and just a plethora of new female characters, and I hope that that is balanced out by a ton of new awesome male characters and a few dope alpha male characters. And again, and important to bring up, I still think that when you look out there in the world with your Star Wars and your Warner Brothers and a lot of other studios, including Sony, trying to make all of this big franchise IP, I still think that despite all of the flaws and the shortcomings of this, the beginning of Phase 4, Marvel Studios is still worlds ahead of all of the competition, and I think a lot of these things that are sort of plaguing what's going on right now are almost behind us, and I look very much forward to a new end game, which I think will be Secret Wars, and a ton of awesome new characters and fun adventures, because the MCU is freaking awesome, and I just want to keep this party going. I'm sure you got some thoughts. I'm sure maybe some of you are triggered, so let me know what you're thinking in the comments section below.